The boy with empty eyes. The sun rose slow and hard over the Texas plains, casting long shadows over the dry earth of Dustfall Ridge. Life out here was never easy, but lately, for Elijah Granger, it was damn near impossible. Elijah was a man worn by time and toil. Once a proud rancher with hundreds of cattle, his herd had dwindled to just 30 heads. The drought had turned the soil to stone. The market had crushed prices, and the bank had sent its final warning. His wife, Maybelle, had passed 5 years earlier from pneumonia, and his daughter, Clara, had gone off to college and then never come back. He was alone, scraping by. Then came the ad. It was buried at the bottom of an old farmer's bulletin board in town. Help offered. 12-year-old boy. Hard-working, orphan. Cheap labor. No questions. A number followed. Elijah ripped the scrap of paper off the board, staring at it. He wrestled with it for 3 days. On the fourth, with his back aching and fences falling apart, he called the number. A man answered, curt and quick. The transaction was strange, cold. Elijah didn't ask too many questions. He didn't want to know the answers. 3 days later, a truck arrived. A boy stepped out, small, dirty, with clothes too big and eyes too old. His name was Jonah. Elijah had expected a mouthy brat or a sullen rebel. What he got was silence. Jonah didn't cry, didn't smile, just stood there like a ghost in the wind, his arms wrapped around himself. You understand English, boy? Elijah asked. Jonah nodded. Then come on. I ain't got time for slow starters. They started small, feeding the chickens, fixing fences, watering the mule. Jonah did everything without question, without hesitation, and always without speaking unless spoken to. Elijah found it strange how someone so young could move like someone twice his age, like he'd done this 100 times before. One night, Elijah caught Jonah fixing the broken barn door with a splintered board and rusted nails. No one had asked him. No one even knew it was broken. You trying to impress me, boy? Elijah asked. No, sir, Jonah said, eyes lowered. Just figured it needed doing. Elijah nodded, grunted, then turned away. But something lodged in his chest that night. A strange feeling. Guilt? Regret? Or maybe something warmer. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. Over the next week, Elijah began watching the boy more closely. Jonah worked like a machine, but flinched at loud noises. He refused to eat more than a slice of bread and a bit of beans at first. He avoided eye contact, and sometimes Elijah caught him staring at the barn rafters like they were gallows. One afternoon, Elijah found Jonah scrubbing the floors of the old house without being asked. The boy looked up, startled, like he'd been caught stealing. You don't have to do that, Jonah, Elijah said. Yes, sir. Just wanted to be useful. Elijah sighed. You already are. Jonah blinked. No one's ever said that before. That night, Elijah sat on the porch, watching the stars. He thought about Clara, about Maybelle, about how the house had been filled with laughter once, music, stories. Now it was just creaking wood and a silent boy. He decided the next morning to take Jonah into town for supplies. Maybe some new clothes. Maybe a pair of boots that fit. When they arrived, the townsfolk stared. Elijah wasn't surprised. He'd never been known as the fatherly type. At the general store, Miss Lila, the owner, watched Jonah as he silently picked out a shirt and pair of pants. Who's the boy? She asked Elijah at the counter. Helping me out on the ranch, Elijah replied. He your kin? No. Lila narrowed her eyes. He looks scared. Elijah paid and left before she could ask more. That night, Jonah sat at the dinner table, staring at his plate. You like chicken and gravy? Elijah asked. Jonah nodded. It's nice, sir. Never had it before. That made Elijah pause. Never? Not once? Where you from, Jonah? The boy stiffened. Then, softly, different places. Who'd you live with? No one for a while. And before that, a man. Jonah hesitated. He wasn't nice. Elijah didn't ask more, but he felt a burn in his throat. Whoever had this boy before him hadn't treated him like a child. Maybe not even like a human. Later, Elijah went into the barn and sat on a hay bale, staring at the ground. He wanted cheap help, someone to keep the ranch alive. But now, he wasn't sure what he had. He looked up as Jonah entered quietly. Sir, the boy asked. Yeah. Do I sleep here forever? Elijah frowned. You mean in the barn? Jonah nodded. No, Elijah said after a pause. From now on, you sleep in the house. You're not livestock. Jonah blinked, then nodded. But Elijah saw it, a flicker. Just a moment. A flicker of something like hope. And that night, for the first time, Elijah Granger locked the barn, not from the outside, but the inside. He walked back into the house, the boy trailing behind him. Maybe he hadn't just hired help. Maybe, somehow, he brought home family, the storm and the seed. Weeks passed, then months. Jonah grew into the land. He still didn't talk much, but he smiled sometimes now, especially when brushing the mule or sitting near the fire with a book Elijah had dusted off from an old shelf. The house no longer echoed with emptiness. There was movement again, laughter in rare moments, and the sound of boots that weren't just Elijah's. Elijah found himself softening in places he didn't know had grown hard. He taught Jonah how to ride a horse, slowly at first, then with pride as the boy galloped through the pastures like a whisper in the wind. He showed him how to mend a broken fence properly, how to recognize when a cow was going to calve. Jonah soaked it all up like the dry earth did spring rain. But the past has a long memory. One cold morning, a black car pulled up the dirt road. It didn't belong in Dustfall Ridge. Sleek, foreign. Out stepped a man in a gray suit with teeth too white and eyes too sharp. Elijah stepped onto the porch, rifle across his lap. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I believe you have something of mine," the man said smoothly. Jonah appeared at the door, froze when he saw the man. Color drained from his face. "Elijah," he whispered. The man smirked. "Hello, Jonah. Did you really think you could run forever?" Elijah stood. "He's not going anywhere with you." The man chuckled. "You pay for him, yes? But he's not yours. He was never yours. He belongs to me. He's a child, not a possession. Not according to the paperwork," the man said, producing a folded document. "I have custody, legal guardianship. You bought stolen property." Elijah stared him down. "You trafficked him." The man smiled. "Call what you like. I call it business." Jonah began shaking. Elijah turned, placed a hand on his shoulder. "It's all right, son. You're not going back with him. He'll take me. They always do. Not this time." That night, Elijah made phone calls to his lawyer, to the sheriff, even to Clara. The sheriff came by, took statements, looked at Jonah with compassion Elijah hadn't seen in a man before. The paperwork the man had was a forgery. The sheriff made a quiet promise. This boy isn't going anywhere unless he wants to. And Jonah didn't want to. After that, the man vanished. No more visits. No more black cars. But Jonah didn't sleep right for weeks. He kept a bag packed under his bed, just in case. Elijah found it one day, returned it quietly to the closet. "Don't need that anymore," he said. "Are you sure?" Jonah asked, voice trembling. "I've never been more sure in my life." One spring morning, after a long winter of snow and hard work, Elijah stood in the field and looked around. The fences were repaired. The livestock had doubled. The house was warm again. And Jonah had grown taller, stronger. He laughed now, played sometimes, asked questions. And once, when Elijah fell from the hayloft and twisted his ankle, Jonah ran for help like a son afraid for his father. It was then Elijah realized what had changed. He hadn't just saved Jonah. Jonah had saved him too. The boy had brought purpose back into a broken life. He was no longer a hired hand, no longer the orphan. He was family. That summer, Elijah filed adoption papers. Legal, final, clean. On the day the judge declared Jonah Granger the lawful son of Elijah Granger, the boy cried for the first time. "Why are you crying, son?" Elijah asked outside the courthouse. "Because no one's ever wanted me before." Elijah knelt down, gripping the boy's shoulders. "You were one of the moment you stepped off that truck. I just didn't know it yet." They drove home in silence, the kind of silence that was full, not empty. The wind blew through the open window, and Jonah stuck his arm out like a bird. At the ranch, Clara waited on the porch. She'd come back, curious to see the father who had changed. She met Jonah with cautious eyes, then embraced him like a brother. That night, the house was filled with laughter again. Jonah played the old guitar Maybelle used to love, plucking clumsy notes that somehow sounded just right. Elijah sat by the fire, smiling at the family he never expected to have again. Out on the fields, wildflowers had started blooming. Life had returned, and all because, one desperate day, a struggling rancher bought a broken child. But what he really found was a reason to live. The end.